In today's video, we continue on with our NHL GM report card series. Today, we look at the Columbus Blue Jackets. They've had a lot of changes this offseason, including a new GM, a new coach, and some significant moves, including a big trade we just seen a few days ago. We'll discuss all their moves, their signings, and grade the work of new GM Don Waddell coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we look at the GM report card series and we do the Columbus Blue Jackets report card for newly appointed GM Don Waddell. Of course, that was a bit of a surprise. We knew the Blue Jackets were going to be looking for a new GM after parting ways with Jarmo Kekalainen. Of course, John Davidson, the team president at the time, had taken over on an interim basis while they found the next leader. Of course, Davidson ended up moving along as well after the hiring of Waddell was completed. Of course, he comes over from the Carolina Hurricanes after a little bit of a surprise departure there. But the Blue Jackets have been extremely busy. Of course, kind of glad that we saw the big trade involving Laine just a short time ago. I didn't get to their report card until after that was done, so that'll certainly help matters here as well with having more information to analyze things. But the Blue Jackets sit in pretty good spot salary cap wise. They've got $15 million in space now. Don Waddell, obviously, by the time he was hired, was getting a little bit into the offseason, and then from there he had to hire a new coach. That was the first thing he had to do, was Dean Evason. I think he made a good hire there. Evason's a well-respected guy, had a good run in Minnesota, has certainly lots of passion, lots of fire, not afraid to be a tough love kind of coach, but at the same time a coach that can be well-respected, somebody who played in the game as well for a long time. So I think overall, they had lots of good candidates to pick from. I think they could have gone in a number of different directions, but I think Evason will be a good fit there. So at the end of the day, I think Waddell's first order of business, I think, went pretty well. But looking at their trades, first of all, we only saw two, but they were one more significant than the other, but they're both, reasonably good here. Alex Texier was traded from Columbus to the St. Louis Blues for a 2025 fourth-round pick. That was earlier in the offseason, of course. That was, one of the first orders of business here for Waddell. The 2025 fourth-rounder, Texier didn't have a high value. He'd been in and out of the NHL the past few years. So overall, is it somebody that they can live without? They can. They have a lot of young players that were kind of taking some of the spots that he would normally play in. So it kind of made sense at the end of the day here. And the bigger one was the blockbuster involving Patrik Laine. Waddell was able to move the full $8.7 million contract of Laine with no salary retained. He had to give up a 2026 second rounder as well to the Montreal Canadiens for young defenseman Jordan Harris. Now, we knew the return wasn't going to be astronomical. At first glance, it might look like the Jackets may not win this deal, but that largely depends on Laine. I mean, Patrik Laine came into the NHL with a lot of, high expectations, and he met those early on. During his first 2-3 years in Winnipeg, he was scoring 30 to 40 goals a season and looked like he was going to be the next dominant goal scorer. I thought he might be, potentially, up there with Ovechkin a lot of years, battling for the top goals in the league. And he kind of, obviously ran into some issues on and off the ice, and his last 2-3 years, 4 years has been down. So if you look at his time in Columbus, he's missed a lot of time as well, but his productivity hasn't been too bad. Now, I know there's some people that say Laine is, comes with some drama and some, locker room issues. I don't see that being the case. I know in Winnipeg, some of the veterans were hard on him because I think it was maybe work ethic. I think he was young, maybe a bit immature, but he was scoring goals at a high rate. Time in Columbus hasn't been quite as good. Signed a big contract. Went through a lot last year off the ice as well. So, you know what? Jordan Harris is a pretty good young defenseman. He's somebody who probably can play top 4 minutes for an extended time in this league. So, really, I think Waddell did well to remove the full cap hit. He gets him his fresh start. Laine didn't want to be back in Columbus. I think there were some players in Columbus that wanted him out as well. We did hear some rumblings about some players and he not getting along. But at the same time, I know he ended up having quite a friendship with Adam Fantilli. So I don't think Laine is all bad. And I don't see Montreal really acquiring him if there was some serious locker room drama issues. I think some of that might be overblown, but a lot of that we really don't know, because we're not there. But at the same time, Waddell pulled off I think a pretty good trade. Now, Montreal, I think it's a good trade as well. They give up a defenseman. Yes, he's a good player, but he's somebody they can take the chance to live without because they have so many young defensemen, and they have a chance to reinvigorate Laine to possibly being a 30-40 goal guy again. And if it works out, then they've got themselves a heck of a deal. If not, they're only committed to him for 2 years. It's not the end of the world. They have some cap flexibility with the Carey Price contract being long-term injury reserve. So, to me, it makes a lot of sense to take the risk. Although in Montreal, I would say that I also would like to have seen them really go after a center instead of a winger. But, it's tempting when you get a player of this skill level and this history be available. So at the end of the day, I like this trade for both sides for right now. I think Waddell did a really good job accommodating the Laine trade request. Now, looking at the signings, we're going to look at internal and external. They didn't really do a lot bringing in players from the outside. They did sign Sean Monahan, was their only real significant UFA move, signing Monahan to a 5-year deal at $5.5 million. Of course, after some down years in Calgary, taking some time to have multiple surgeries and rehabilitate his body, he bounced back in Montreal, went on to Winnipeg and had a strong finish there the second half of last year and into the playoffs. And now Monahan gets reunited with his old line mate and good buddy, Johnny Gaudreau. And you know what? I think this move was done for 2 reasons. One, it gives him a lot more depth down the middle, which is obviously important in any team. He's a good veteran who can lead by example with a lot of the young kids, so there's that. And Johnny Gaudreau has not really worked out in Columbus. And you could make an argument that it's not all his fault, that it's certainly, he went from playing with guys like Lindholm and Monahan and Tkachuk in Calgary to very different line mates in Columbus, and it just hasn't worked. And reuniting him with somebody who he had great chemistry with for an extended number of years probably is a wise move. It probably could be good for both of their careers. I mean, Monahan looked like towards the end of his time in Calgary, looked like he might be kind of at the end, and he reinvigorates himself to get a 5-year deal over $25 million. That's just significant money for a player at this stage of his career. So, you know what? I think it's a risk that I would be willing to take. 5 years, though, might be the only part that's a little bit iffy, but the money's fine. I like the player. I think he's a good fit. We'll see if the 5 years works out or not. They also signed Jack Johnson to a 1-year deal at league minimum, and Dylan Gambrell, 1-year league minimum as well. Gambrell, I believe, spent all or most of last year in the American Hockey League, but it's an option for a 4th-line center. Internally, they had lots of the youngsters and RFAs to look after. I think 1 or 2 of these were done before Waddell's arrival that Davidson and company looked after, but most of these were Waddell's doing. They signed Kirill Marchenko, 3 years at $3.85. He's proven he can score. They got Cole Sillinger, 2 years at $2.25. Again, pretty good bridge deal. I think Sillinger will prove to be a pretty good two-way player. Kent Johnson signs 3 years at $1.8. I was a little surprised that Johnson agreed to 3 years. I thought he might want 1 or 2 because, he didn't have a great season last year. He certainly had a down year. I believe he needed a surgery as well that he's recovering from. So, I thought he might bet on himself and go shorter term, but for the Jackets to get him at 3 years at that level, I think is good money. They signed Jet Greaves, who's a budding goaltending prospect who's continuing to get better. 2 years at $812,000. That's a steal. Yegor Chenikov, 2 years at $2.1. I mean, another good deal. They signed a couple of their top prospects, and Luca Pinelli and Gavin Brindley, to 3-year entry-level contracts as well. And that's about it. So, I mean, Chinnikovs, Johnson, Sillinger, Marchenko. They're, 4 younger forwards. Most of those guys are wingers, too. Like, they've got some good pieces there. You throw in Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, Boone Jenner, then your top 9's starting to round out. If they can all take roles and be, healthy contributors to it, these guys all have potential. But, none of these guys were, as young RFAs, were really in line for 7-8 year deals. So Waddell gets a bridge deal for all these guys. They can continue to evaluate, continue to see how they develop, and they don't make huge commitments. So I really will commend Waddell for how he's handled all of these players and all of these deals. I think they're all pretty fair based on their production and very team friendly in the sense that they didn't overcommit. They can still continue to evaluate here in a 1 or 2 years time. If they continue to go, yeah, you may have to pay a little more than you would have now on a long-term deal, but you had to take that risk because you can't say with certainty that they're all going to be, first or second line long-term players in the NHL. They have that potential. It's there, but you have that flexibility. So I do like that. Summarizing the in and out here, coming in, Monahan, Johnson, Gambrell. Nothing crazy outside of Monahan, really. Going out, of course, they traded Patrick Laine. They moved on from Adam Boqvist and Jake Bean on the back end. They decided not to bring back Alex Nylander, even though he finished really strong there last year, and Brendan Gaunce is out as well. So he hires a new coach in Dean Evison, which I have no problem with. He moves the Laine contract without retaining any money and gets a good young defenseman. I think that's pretty good there. They moved Texier for a mid-round pick. Okay, that's fine. The contracts, all their RFAs turned out to be pretty good. They didn't do anything too crazy in free agency. Like the Monahan deal might prove to be too long. It matches the ending term of Gaudreau's contract. I'm sure that was done for a reason. But it's like, I might have a small issue with the Monahan term. But it might be fine. If he stays healthy and can play like he has the last year or so, then it's going to be fine. But I do have some concerns with Monahan's long-term health, given all he's been through for 5 years. But it's sometimes you have to have something, an incentive like that, to bring him into your team on free agency. So that's probably the only real mark against him. Is I'm a little bit skeptical of the term on that contract. Otherwise, they've had a good summer. They didn't go out and spend anything crazy. They understand where they're at. They know they need to rebuild. They want players that want and need to be there. They locked up all their young players on good bridge deals. They secured their center depth by bringing in Monahan. Made a really good draft pick in Caden Lindstrom as well. They entertained offers to move off that pick and didn't do it because no offers were good enough, according to Waddell. But you add Fantilli, who came in last year. You got Lindstrom this year. Brindley's coming. They got Marchenko, Sillinger, Johnson, Chinnikov. They've got some good talent there. So I have no problem with any of the work of Waddell outside of the Monahan term, which is why I'm giving him a B+. I probably would have given him an A if it wasn't for the term on the Monahan contract. But like I said, I could be very wrong on that. I just have some concerns after everything he's been through. But he can probably prove us wrong there. So let me know what you think. Has Don Waddell done a good job during his brief time as Columbus Blue Jackets general manager? I like what they're building. I don't think it's going to be, a competitive year for them. I think it's going to be another big year of growth. I think they're going to get another high pick. But in a couple of years' time, as these players continue to grow, I can see this team getting a lot better and making things more interesting in the Metro Division. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Of course, I don't think we're also done seeing complete trades. They have enough cap space there. He might weaponize that with another move before training camp. It might even improve that grade even further. So let me know in the comments. We'll talk further. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.